absolute jaw-dropper late this afternoon, a report from the New York Times. It lays out that in the spring of 2017, Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein suggested secretly recording President Trump and discussed invoking the 25th Amendment to throw the president out of office. Now, Rosenstein, as you'd expect, is forcefully denying that this ever happened. Separately, a Fox News source said to be in the same room as this conversation is claiming that Rosenstein's comments were just sarcastic. They weren't serious. Does anyone believe that tonight? Washington Post is also reporting that. But let's take a trip, shall we, down Rosenstein memory lane. Now, this is the same guy who responded like this to demands from Congress to produce documents in that Russia probe.
The Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We're going to do what's required by the rule of law.
Oh, so congressional oversight and demands for accountability and transparency are extortion? That somehow runs counter to the rule of law? Got it, Rod. Well, his apparent contempt for oversight and lawmakers doesn't stop there. Here he is in front of the House Judiciary Committee just a few months ago.
I am the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. Okay? I'm not the person doing the redacting. I'm responsible for responding to your concerns as I have.
Did you read the FISA application before you signed it?
I'm not going to comment about any FISA application.
So you won't say to this committee whether or not you even read the document you signed that authorized spying on people associated with the Trump campaign?
Well, I
love the trailing off there. It's perfect for a Friday night. And let's not forget that Rosenstein even threatened to subpoena emails, phone records, and other documents from lawmakers and staff on the House Intel Committee, and he did that earlier this year. Now, let's be clear. If the New York Times reporting is accurate, the president tonight should seriously consider whether Rod Rosenstein should remain on the job. The White House should be devoting every resource it can to determining the veracity of this report. We just cannot have this plotting at the highest levels of the Justice Department against the chief executive of this executive branch. Joining us now for reaction is former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, Lee Smith from Real Clear Investigations, and former U.S. Attorney Kendall Coffey. Let's go right to you, Lee. You have been covering Rod Rosenstein for, I guess a year and a half now, since he initially got this job as Deputy Attorney General. Tonight, I just want to play for you. This is a short montage of a variety of pundits claiming, per the Washington Post, that this conversation about wearing a wire, getting other people to wear a wire, this is all just a joke. Let's watch.
If the words were said, it seems more likely they were said in some sort of sarcastic or exasperated way, rather than as a serious plan to actually wire up and go in and do this.
This does not give any grounds, and I really mean this, any grounds at all in terms of any action of Rosenstein that justifies firing him.
It makes sense to me that maybe he could have made a crack about this.
Lee.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to see the Rosenstein story, the story about Rosenstein in the Times and in the Post. These are both part of the declassification issue. They need to be seen in the context of a week's
How so?
worth of...
Explain that.
Okay, we've seen since Monday when the president said he was going to declassify documents. Over the last week, the New York Times, ABC News, a number of publications have had stories trying to block the declassification. They've been sourced to former and current U.S. officials. I see this as part of the same thing. The Times story is apparently sourced to Andy McCabe.
Oh, he says he didn't talk. He said his people are saying they didn't talk to the Times on that.
The lawyer statement looks to me like a non-denial denial on Twitter. I think what it looks like is that McCabe or someone close to McCabe is threatening Rosenstein, saying, hey, I've got a lot of dirty stuff on you as well. If these things aren't declassified, you're going down with me. Unbeknownst to Andrew McCabe, it appears, according to my sources, that sometime between last night and this morning, Rod Rosenstein went in and talked to President Trump and convinced him to hold off on declassifying the documents, kick them instead over to the Inspector General.
What is that going to do? The Inspector General, how does that help the president?
Exactly. It does not help the president. The purpose was to delay. But it was Rosenstein, apparently, who convinced Trump to do it. Unbeknownst to McCabe, the wrathful McCabe had no idea. Presumably, the Times story was in the works for several days. The story drops a couple of hours after Trump tweets that the documents are going to go to the IG, and you can imagine Rosenstein's horror. McCabe has blown this beautiful plan I had to get us both in the clear. I think that's what happened. Rosenstein's effort to cover up, again, the Post story appears sourced to him, and the idea is we have to cover this up. I was telling a joke. Of course I wouldn't do such a thing. Andy McCabe didn't get my joke.
This is what I understand. If it's a joke, he and Corey, you can chime in here. He must have a really lame sense of humor, because here's a joke isn't, hey, let's wear a wire. I'll wear a wire. Or someone else, one of you can, and then we'll get someone to invoke the 25th Amendment. Maybe I can get Sessions. How is that funny? There's no tee-hee, giggle in any of that. Corey, I think he's right. I think Lee is right. This is all about the declassification. Trump backtracked for some reason, and I think that was a big gift to Rosenstein, because he's worried about that FISA application and the fact that exculpatory information was not put in that FISA application to monitor Carter Page. Corey.
Well, you're exactly right, and everybody has to remember that that was the third renewal of the application. There were 4 actual applications. The first application was denied by the FISA court. Rod Rosenstein signed this, and when the president made the announcement that he was going to declassify Bruce Orr's 302s, that was going to reveal that Nellie Orr, Bruce's wife, was talking to Christopher Steele, that the Justice Department knew about this, and that I'm sure Rod Rosenstein at the Justice Department was aware of what Bruce Orr was doing because he was his supervisor at some level. That all would have come out very clearly. And he was so afraid that that declassification was going to expose him for what he is, which is part of the deep state. This collusion never existed. It's been a fake dossier from the beginning. And look, we've done extensive research on this now. We've seen what Rod Rosenstein's really about. Whether it's Rod Rosenstein, he covered up for Peter Schrock, for Lisa Page, for Andy McCabe, for Jim Comey. He's also the individual, and you remember this, who recommended Bob Mueller become the head of the FBI when Jim Comey was fired. And then the next day, he personally appointed Bob Mueller as a special counsel to investigate this president.
Tonight, the president briefly referenced this issue with the secret recording. Let's watch.
We have great people in the Department of Justice. We have great people. These are people, I really believe, you take a poll, I got to be at 95%. But you got some real bad ones. You've seen what's happened at the FBI. They're all gone. But there's a lingering stench, and we're going to get rid of that, too.
Kendall, lingering stench. Your thoughts there. Who is he referring to? Pray tell.
Obviously, he's concerned about Rod Rosenstein. I think he should be. I don't think we can make the New York Times the judge and jury of Rosenstein's fate. But what the challenge is to find a very accelerated framework for getting to the bottom of this. And I don't think the president needs to, for example, ask the Justice Department to investigate itself. I think he has the power and perhaps should go ahead and put together an investigative mechanism, perhaps relying in part on the White House counsel's office, so that they can get access, redacted, blacked out in certain places or not, to whatever these McCabe memos are. And at some point, to bring Rod Rosenstein into the office, look him in the eye, as the president has famously done, a lot of hired and fired people, looked in the eye, and see if he can get an adequate explanation for this. Because if it's true, if the way it's being presented in the New York Times is true, it's something very, very troubling that can't be continuing.
Well, apparently, according to the report, I'm going to read some of it. I think it's important that I read some of the New York Times reporting. But apparently, the gist of it is Rosenstein was really ticked off that even though he wrote that memo, justifying the firing of Comey, giving a justification for the firing of Comey, he was mad that then the president relied on it when he was asked about it. So he both wrote it, I guess that's a suggestion of the president, or the request of the president, then he was mad that the president relied on it, and that just torqued him off to no end. This is the New York Times reporting. I want all three of you to listen to this. Rosenstein raised the idea of wearing a recording device, or wire, as he put it, to secretly tape the president when he visited the White House. One participant asked whether Rosenstein was serious, and he replied animatedly that he was. Now, it goes on to say, it is not clear how determined he was about seeing them through, though he did tell McCabe that he might be able to persuade Attorney General Jeff Sessions and John Kelly, this is about the 25th Amendment, then Secretary of Homeland Security and now the White House Chief of Staff, to mount an effort to invoke the 25th. And third point, according to others who described his comments, Rosenstein not only confirmed that he was serious about the idea, but also followed up by suggesting that other FBI officials who were interviewing to be the Bureau's director could also secretly record Trump. This was around the time, of course, where after he fired Comey, he was looking at Wray. Rosenstein's name had been raised for this, and a few others, including a former Obama person. But he wanted, according to this report, and there's no humor in this, so that when he says it's humor, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry, this is a woman's intuition, but it's ridiculous. No humor in this. Now, Lee, I want to play this for you because the Democrats tonight are saying this is just the pretext Trump needs to fire Rosenstein. This is what Leon Panetta said tonight.
He's got to think very carefully about the implications of taking action here, because if he does this, it raises concerns about the Mueller investigation. It raises concerns about the possibility of obstruction.
Okay. Why would it be obstruction of justice? The Mueller investigation goes on.
I mean, I think the whole thing has it exactly opposite. I mean, it was Rosenstein who appointed him. I think the interesting thing and revelatory thing about these two stories is it exposes a lot of people, a lot of wrongdoers at the FBI and DOJ. They're turning on each other like rats. I hope that the president sees that before he makes any decisions. And I'll say that I think the important thing, the really vital thing, is declassifying these documents so that we can all understand what the bad guys at the DOJ and the FBI were doing, as these two articles give some sort of indication of. There's more in those documents we can be sure of. We'd like to see them.
And, Corey, it is true, is it not, that the president can reverse his reversal at any moment? Now, kicking it over to the Inspector General, which, again, has no subpoena power. I mean, Horowitz is a good guy, but this is not going to get us anywhere. He can reverse his decision at any moment, because right now, it seems to me that the Bruce Orr 302s, those are the interview memos that he wrote, the FISA applications and other text messages are critical to be released unredacted, except for any sources and methods, which there apparently aren't any. But, Corey, the president has that ability to do that. He has to override Rosenstein to do it.
Well, that's right. But you have to remember, Laura, when he said he was going to redact, there was only certain pages of that FISA application, so there's no concern from a national security perspective. I think it was pages 10 through 12 and then 14 other pages there. So it wasn't the entire application. So that's perfectly fine. But you also have to remember, Andrew McCabe has been referred by the IG for a criminal referral. That referral is sitting at the Department of Justice. My guess is Rod Rosenstein is the one who's deciding whether or not Andrew McCabe is going to be prosecuted for lying under oath to the FBI on 3 separate occasions, particularly when he was the acting director of the FBI after Jim Comey was fired. So, look, these guys ran this tight little cabal that they never thought anyone was ever going to get caught, between Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce Orr, Rod Rosenstein. These guys did things. And then you throw in Clapper and Brennan, and you've got the making of a story that nobody could actually believe, that these 9 or 10 individuals have tried from day one to take down a duly elected president. Not only they're a deep state, they're an enemy of the people.
Kendall, your reaction to this has just been such a wild day of news, both on Kavanaugh, which we're going to get to in a moment, and on this story. But I don't see how this continues with this white-hot tension between the president and the Justice Department. Not about even Mueller at this point. This is just about the running of the department and just basic decisions about redacting documents or not redacting them, classifying or declassifying. I know it's related to Mueller, but I don't see how it's a sustainable situation with Rosenstein. And I know other people would say also with Sessions, but with Rosenstein, I think it's a bad relationship.
Yeah, it's got to be incredibly uncomfortable and increasingly less productive for the Department of Justice. But I still think there needs to be a thoughtful, very, very fast inquiry. It doesn't have to be formally structured, but the president needs to get to the bottom of this. We can't rely on newspaper stories in terms of making judgments about one of the most powerful positions in the United States government. But on the other hand, precisely because the Deputy Attorney General's position is so powerful. This needs to be resolved, as you say, and resolved quickly.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.